If your own husband hesitated to stand up for you in front of your whole family, would you fight for that trust, or would you walk the way I did? Tell me what you'd have done in that kitchen. My own family stood in that kitchen and called me a thief. The people who raised me believed a stranger's tears over their own daughter's word. I packed my bags that same night, certain I had just lost everything I'd ever called home. But everything changed the moment a forgotten security camera across the street caught a truth none of them were ready to face. Stay with me till the end, because what that footage revealed wasn't just about stolen money. It was about a secret that would tear this whole family apart. If this story moves you, hit subscribe, drop a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it too. My name is Imani Washington. 27 years old, and up until one Tuesday night in March, I thought there was one thing in this world that couldn't break. Family. I was wrong about that. I was standing in my parents' kitchen on Cascade Road, West End, Atlanta. Same kitchen I learned to make my grandmother's cornbread in. Same yellow linoleum I split my knee open on when I was 6. And my mother's looking at me like she doesn't know me. "Baby girl," she says, voice shaking. "What did you do?" $8,000 gone from the safe at Washington's Soul Food, my father's restaurant. 30 years he put into that place. And standing behind my parents, mascara running down her face, is my brother's wife, Keisha, pointing right at me. She took it. I checked the log myself. Here's what nobody in that room knew yet. The thing that took me weeks and a piece of grainy security footage to finally drag out into the light. Keisha didn't guess that number. She said it like she already knew. 8,000. The exact amount I'd mentioned to my husband in private 1 week before. Money I thought only the two of us knew about. So how does a woman accuse you of stealing $8,000 and already know exactly what that number meant to you? Hold on to that question, because what that camera eventually caught wasn't just a theft. It was something none of us were ready for. But let me back up first. Let me show you the kitchen before it turned into a courtroom. 7 o'clock, maybe a little past. Rain coming down soft and steady on Cascade Road, the kind that makes the street shine gold under the lights. Inside, the kitchen still smelled like the night before. Fried chicken, a little cayenne, cornbread cooling on the counter. My mother had her good dish towel over her shoulder, the one with the faded sunflowers she's had since before I was born. My father stood by the stove, arms crossed, glasses pushed up in his hair like he'd just been going through the books. I came by like I did most Tuesdays, to help close out the week. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush. I remember setting my keys down on the counter, that small, ordinary sound, metal against laminate, and how loud it felt in a room that was already holding its breath. The radio was still on low from earlier, some gospel station my mother kept playing in the background while she cooked. And for half a second, I thought maybe it was just an ordinary Tuesday. Then I saw my mother's face. Then I saw Keisha's. I noticed things in that first second that I shouldn't have had time to notice. The way my father's reading glasses had slid halfway down his nose, like he'd pushed them up in a hurry the moment he heard my car pull into the driveway. The way the overhead light flickered, once, just once. The way it always did when the rain got heavy enough to mess with the wiring. The way Keisha's hand, the one not pointing at me, rested flat against her stomach, protective, deliberate, like she'd practiced exactly where to put it. That's when Keisha started crying. That's when my mother asked the question that ended everything I thought I knew about this family. And Keisha said the number, 8,000, with a certainty nobody in that kitchen seemed to notice. My ears started ringing a little. That specific kind of ringing that shows up right before your body understands something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. I remember looking down at my own hands, like they belonged to somebody else, and thinking, say something, defend yourself, but my mouth had gone dry as chalk. There's a particular kind of paralysis that hits when an accusation lands somewhere you weren't braced for. I'd spent my whole life being the daughter who showed up, who balanced the books, who never gave anybody a reason to doubt her. And in the space of about 4 seconds, all of that history evaporated, replaced by a single number hanging in the air like smoke. I tried to explain. I'd been seeing gaps in the books for weeks. I was going to bring it up myself. My mother just shook her head, eyes wet. Keisha's 4 months along, baby. Your father's first grandchild. We can't put this kind of stress on the family right now. My father nodded along, like the pregnancy itself was proof of something. Fear does that to good people. Makes them choose comfort over facts. My parents weren't cruel. They were scared. Scared of losing a grandchild's smile. Scared of cracking whatever piece they had left. And fear rarely sides with the truth. I watched my mother's face as she said it, and underneath the fear, I caught something else. Guilt, maybe? Or the early shape of it? Like some part of her already knew she was choosing the easier story over the harder truth, and hated herself a little for it, even as she did it anyway. Then came the second hit, the one that hurt worse. Jamal, my husband, had been standing quiet in the doorway this whole time, and he finally opened his mouth. Imani, is this about the credit card? Did you take it to cover what we owe? He wasn't asking to defend me. He was asking because some part of him already believed it. Something in me went cold right then. Not angry, past angry. 6 years I built with this man. 6 years of him telling me I was the most honest person he'd ever met. And in front of my whole family, he let the doubt win. A chair scraped somewhere behind me. Andre, shifting in his seat, not standing, not speaking, just shifting, the small sound of a man trying to disappear into the furniture. I noticed the wedding ring on my finger had started to feel heavy all of a sudden, the way jewelry does when your whole arm goes numb with adrenaline. I looked at Jamal for a long moment, searching his face for some sign of the man who used to hold my hand across restaurant tables, who used to text me just to say he was thinking about me in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. I didn't find him. Just a stranger standing in a doorway, weighing my honesty against a number that had been handed to him secondhand. I didn't argue, didn't beg. Picked up my purse, walked to the door, turned back once. If I did this, I'll own it, I told them, steady, even with my chest caving in. But if I didn't, you're all going to have to live with what you decided here tonight. The screen door creaked behind me the way it always had, that same rusted hinge my father kept promising to fix and never did. I remember thinking, even in that moment, how strange it was that the small, familiar sounds of that house kept happening exactly the way they always had, like the world hadn't gotten the memo that everything had just changed. Then I left. Drove home through the rain, hands locked on the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Every Sunday dinner playing back in my head. Andre's old stories. Jamal holding me after a long shift. And now, my own blood, my own husband turning their backs on me. Why was Keisha so sure of herself? Why did Jamal doubt me that fast? Those questions rode with me the whole way home. My heart was wrecked. But somewhere underneath it, something stubborn started burning. I sat in my car outside my own building for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. The engine ticking as it cooled, rain drumming on the roof, my own breath fogging up the windshield. I kept replaying my mother's face, the exact moment her eyes went from concern to suspicion, trying to pinpoint when, exactly, I'd stopped being her daughter and started being a problem to manage. The apartment turned cold after that. Not the weather kind of cold. Most nights, I just sat on the couch, knees up to my chest, that soul food smell still stuck somewhere in my memory, crying without even meaning to. Jamal started coming home later, eyes distant, careful, like every word had a cost now. There's a particular silence that settles into a home once trust leaves it. Not the comfortable quiet of two people who don't need to talk, but something heavier, something that sits in the corners of every room. I started noticing it in small things. The way Jamal set his keys down without looking at me. The way we'd both reach for the remote at the same time and then pull back. Neither of us wanting to be the one who chose what we watched, because choosing felt like claiming something we didn't have a right to anymore. I started sleeping on my side of the bed only, even on the nights he didn't come home at all. Like crossing that invisible line down the middle of the mattress would somehow make things worse than they already were. I'd lie there in the dark, listening to the apartment settle, the pipes groaning, a car alarm going off somewhere down the block. and I'd replay that kitchen scene over and over until the edges of it blurred into something closer to nightmare than memory. One night, his phone lit up on the counter while he was in the shower. Text from a number I didn't know. "You should ask your wife about that money. He never said a thing to me about it." Just got quieter, and the marriage got smaller day by day. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway, watching the steam from the shower curl out under the bathroom door, knowing he was in there, reading that text over and over, deciding what to do with it, and deciding, in the end, to do nothing. That silence told me more than any argument could have. He was protecting himself from having to choose a side. And not choosing, I was starting to understand, was its own kind of choosing. I started digging through old financial records late at night, since sleep wasn't happening anyway. The apartment had this hum to it after midnight, the refrigerator cycling on and off, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps creaking across our ceiling, and I'd sit there at the kitchen table with a desk lamp and a stack of printouts, highlighter in hand, feeling like a stranger in my own life. Buried in a folder I hadn't touched in months, I found something that stopped my heart for a second. Handwritten notes, not my writing, listing vague, personal expenses, numbers that didn't match anything in the real books. The handwriting was Keisha's. My hands were shaking by the time I photographed every page. I remember the flash from my phone bouncing off the kitchen window, and for one paranoid second, I thought somebody outside might have seen it, might know what I'd found before I'd even had time to understand it myself. I sat with those photos open on my phone for a long time that night, just staring at them, feeling something shift inside my chest. Not quite relief, more like the first solid ground I'd felt under my feet in weeks. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the gaps in the books. Somebody had built this piece by piece, and I had just found the first loose thread. Andre stopped picking up my calls altogether. I'd watch the phone ring through to voicemail 4 times, 5 times, and each unanswered call felt like another small door closing somewhere I used to belong. We'd been close once, closer than most siblings, the kind of close where you don't even need to finish a sentence for the other person to understand exactly what you mean. Now he couldn't even bring himself to hear my voice. Then Keisha called me herself, voice dripping sweet. "Imani, why don't you just pay the $8,000 back? For the family. Mama and Daddy don't need this stress, not with the baby coming." I knew exactly what she was doing. Pay it back. I'm admitting to a theft I never committed. Refuse. I'm the stubborn one who cares more about being right than keeping the peace. No answer that didn't make me the villain. Manipulators don't need to win the argument. They just need to build a trap where every response makes the other person look guilty. That's not an accident. That's design. And Keisha had been building hers a long time. I held the phone away from my ear for a second while she talked, just listening to the practiced rhythm of her voice, the way it rose and fell at exactly the right moments, like she'd rehearsed this exact phone call in front of a mirror. There was something almost impressive about it, in a sick kind of way. I'd never seen anyone perform sincerity that well. I said no anyway. She cried on cue and hung up. I was sinking deeper into isolation by the day, the kind of isolation that doesn't announce itself all at once, but arrives in small absences. A group text I got quietly removed from. A cousin's birthday party I wasn't invited to. My mother's Facebook posts that used to tag me in old family photos suddenly going quiet. I'd check my phone constantly, half hoping, half dreading, and mostly just finding nothing at all. That's when Darius Freeman reached out. He used to run the books at the restaurant years back before Keisha ever showed up. Texted me out of nowhere. "I don't believe what they're saying about you. Can we talk?" I read that text 4 or 5 times before I let myself believe it was real. Somebody, anybody, outside my own shrinking circle still thought I was telling the truth. I cried reading it. The kind of crying that comes from relief instead of grief, which somehow felt even heavier. We met at a coffee shop on Cascade Road, same street I grew up on, except now it felt like enemy ground. I remember sitting across from him in a booth by the window, both of us with untouched coffee going cold between us, and how he kept glancing toward the door like he was worried someone might recognize him talking to me. Darius leaned in. The main server got wiped clean right before all this. Hard drives fried too. But I set up an old backup system years back, off-site. Nobody else knows it exists. I might be able to pull something. First real hope I'd had in weeks. Hope, it turns out, comes with its own price tag. I drove home that night with the radio off, just the sound of the tires on wet asphalt, turning Darius's words over and over in my head. For the first time since that night in the kitchen, I let myself imagine what it might feel like to be believed again. I didn't trust the feeling. Hope had already burned me once, and some part of me kept bracing for it to burn me again. A few days later, I noticed something off in the joint account Jamal and I still shared. An anonymous deposit. $8,000 exactly, routed through some account neither of us recognized. Somebody wanted it to look like the money had just reappeared, like Jamal and I had been hiding it together the whole time. I stared at that number on the screen for a long time before I even called Jamal in to see it, my stomach doing slow, sick turns. Whoever did this wasn't sloppy. Whoever did this understood exactly how it would look, exactly what conclusions everyone would jump to, exactly how it would tighten the noose instead of loosening it. I showed him. His face went pale. Your family already thinks we're in this together. Now it looks confirmed. We had it out that night, worse than ever. Not loud, final. The kind of fight where you can feel the whole marriage splitting down the middle. Your family believes Keisha because of that grandbaby, he said. I don't even know who to trust anymore. Packed a bag that same night, left for his mother's. I stood in the doorway watching his taillights disappear down the street, rain starting up again right on cue, like the universe had a sense of timing. And I remember thinking how strange it was that a marriage could end not with screaming, not with anything dramatic at all, just with the quiet click of a car door and the slow fade of red lights into the dark. I sat there alone after, staring at our wedding photo on the wall, trying to understand how a kitchen full of people who loved me turned into a courtroom that already had its verdict. Somebody out there had planned every piece of this, and I was starting to get a pretty good idea who. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of the living room with my back against the couch, wrapped in the throw blanket Jamal's grandmother had crocheted for our wedding, and I let myself cry the way I hadn't let myself cry since that first night in my parents' kitchen. Not pretty crying, the kind that comes from somewhere low in your chest and doesn't care how it looks or sounds. Darius and I kept at it, pulling together whatever we could. Every call felt like a test of how much I had left. Some nights I wanted to quit completely, but Keisha's calm little smile and Jamal's doubt kept dragging me back to the work. We'd meet at odd hours, whenever Darius could slip away from his own life to help piece mine back together. And there was something almost sacred about those late-night sessions. Two people hunched over a laptop in a near-empty coffee shop, trying to drag the truth up out of static and broken audio files. The audio we recovered was faint, broken up, but real. Keisha's voice, talking about money that had already gone into the account. I remember the first time we got a clean enough stretch of it to actually understand the words, how my whole body went still, how Darius had to play it back 3 times before either of us said anything at all. It wasn't a smoking gun yet, but it was something. It was proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. We decided it was time. No more hiding. I drove to the restaurant with that file backed up 3 different ways, praying it would finally clear my name. My hands were sweating against the steering wheel the whole drive over, and I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd say it, trying to find a version of myself that sounded calm instead of desperate. But under the hope, something else was building. A storm. Everything was about to come apart, and I had no idea yet how much more I still had left to lose. The confrontation at the restaurant was tense from the second I walked in. The smell hit me before anything else did. Fryer oil, sweet tea, the particular warmth of a kitchen that had fed this family for 30 years. And for one disorienting second, my body wanted to relax into it the way it always had, before my mind caught up and reminded me why I was really there. I played the audio right there by the register. Keisha's face went white, then tight, panicked. I watched her eyes dart toward my father, then toward Andre, calculating, recalculating, the way you'd watch someone work out a math problem under pressure. But she recovered fast, faster than I expected, burst into tears, pulled out her phone, started showing transfer records. "I sent that money to cover Andre's gambling losses," she said, voice shaking on cue. He'd been making bad investments behind everybody's back. I was protecting him, protecting this whole family without anyone finding out. One sentence. That's all it took for her to flip from suspect to martyr. It's an old trick, if you've ever watched somebody do it before. Confess to something smaller, more forgivable, to bury something worse underneath it. The room hears, "I was protecting my husband," and stops listening for the actual lie hiding right behind it. By the time everybody's done admiring her sacrifice, nobody's asking the question that matters anymore. I watched it happen in real time. Watch the suspicion drain out of my mother's face and get replaced with something closer to sympathy. Watched my father's shoulders drop the way they do when a man decides he's heard enough and made up his mind. I wanted to scream. I didn't. I just stood there, feeling the ground shift under a story that had taken weeks of sleepless nights to build, watching it get buried under a better told lie. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face hardened. Not at Keisha. At me. "You went digging around behind everybody's backs," he said, voice shaking with an anger I'd never had pointed at me before. "You tore this family apart, chasing money that was already explained." Right there, in front of everyone, he told me I wasn't welcome at the restaurant anymore. Whatever stake I might have had in Washington's soul food, done. Disinherited in front of the whole family over a story that wasn't even true. The words landed somewhere deep in my chest, somewhere I didn't even know could still get hurt after everything else. This restaurant wasn't just a business. It was every birthday I'd ever celebrated in that back booth, every holiday, every Saturday morning I'd spent as a kid, sitting on an overturned crate watching my father season a pot of greens. And in one sentence, he'd erased all of it. Jamal had come back that evening. He looked at me with something worse than anger, just exhaustion. Like he'd run completely out of belief in me. "I can't do this anymore," he said, quiet, and walked back out into the rain. I watched him go through the front window, watched the rain swallow him up under the streetlight, and some small, stubborn part of me kept waiting for him to turn around. He didn't. Andre said nothing at all. Just stood there, eyes on the floor, refusing to take a side. And somehow that silence cut almost as deep as the accusations did. Silence feels neutral to the one staying quiet. It rarely feels that way to the one standing alone in the room. Andre told himself he wasn't choosing a side, but doing nothing in the face of an injustice is still a choice, and I felt the weight of his land on me like a verdict. I looked at my brother for a long moment, willing him to meet my eyes, willing him to remember every time I'd stood up for him growing up, every time I'd covered for him with our parents, every late-night phone call where I'd been the one person he trusted with the truth. He kept his eyes on the floor the whole time, drove home that night with the wipers fighting the storm, tears blurring whatever I could still see. Lost my parents' trust, my marriage, my place in the only restaurant I'd ever called home. First time in my life I let myself wonder if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe silence would have cost me less than the truth just did. That doubt, the quiet, "maybe it's me," is one of the cruelest tricks the mind plays on somebody who's been gaslit for weeks straight. It isn't proof of guilt, it's just proof of exhaustion, the natural cost of being disbelieved by the people whose belief you needed most. I pulled into my own driveway and just sat there with the engine off, rain hammering the roof, and let myself fall apart completely for the first time since this whole thing started. Not the careful, contained crying I'd been doing in front of other people. Something rawer than that. I cried until my chest ached, until I had nothing left. And then I sat in the silence afterward, feeling strangely, terribly calm. Like I'd finally hit the bottom of something and there was nowhere left to fall. Darius called late that night. I almost didn't pick up. When I finally did, something different in his voice. Careful, guarded hope. There's a jewelry store across from the restaurant. Their camera's got a wide angle, catches the front window. I'm trying to get that footage now. Long shot, but if there's anything left to find, it's there. I didn't let myself hope this time. Hope had already cost me enough. The days after felt like wandering through fog. Parents wouldn't answer. Jamal sent one short text. I need some time. Keisha posted a photo online showing off her belly. Comments full of hearts from relatives who'd been wishing me the same thing just a month before. I scrolled past those comments more times than I'd like to admit, reading the names of aunts and cousins who'd once sent me baby shower gifts of my own. Watching them cheer for a woman who had stolen my entire family out from under me. Then Darius texted, "Footage is ready. You need to see this." My heart was pounding before I even left the apartment. I drove there with my hands gripping the wheel too tight, the way I always seem to do lately, like holding on hard enough might keep the whole world from spinning further out of control. We met at the same coffee shop. He turned the laptop toward me, didn't say a word. Footage was grainy, shot from across the street at night, but clear enough. Keisha letting herself into the restaurant alone, well after closing. But she wasn't alone for long. Somebody else stepped into frame beside her. I remember the exact sound the coffee shop made around me in that moment. The hiss of the espresso machine, somebody's laughter from a table near the door, the ordinary hum of a Tuesday afternoon, while my entire understanding of the last month quietly rearranged itself on a laptop screen. We brought the footage to a lawyer my father trusted, called the whole family in. Marcus, Naomi, Andre, Keisha, even Jamal. Nobody pushed back on it. I think by then, everybody could feel something about to break wide open. The office smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee from a pot somebody had left on too long. Nobody sat close to anybody else. My mother kept twisting her wedding ring around her finger over and over, the same nervous motion I'd seen her do at my grandfather's funeral. Keisha sat with her hands folded over her stomach, chin up, like she'd already rehearsed whatever face she was about to make. I sat near the window, watching the rest of the room out of the corner of my eye, cataloging every small movement. My father's jaw working, clenching and unclenching, Andre's leg bouncing under the table, restless, anxious. Jamal sitting as far from both me and Keisha as a small room allowed, like he was trying to remain neutral territory in a war he didn't want to be part of. The lawyer played it on the office screen. Whole room went dead silent as the image sharpened. Keisha, slipping in after hours. Keisha, opening the safe like she'd done it 100 times. Keisha, placing a duplicate of my access card by the register, then wiping it clean. I heard my father's breathing change beside me, that slow, controlled kind of breathing a man does when he's trying not to fall apart in front of people. I reached over without thinking and put my hand on his arm. He didn't pull away, but before any of that, the footage caught something none of us were ready for. Outside, under the streetlight, Keisha stopped to kiss a man none of us recognized. Lingering, intimate, the kind that made the whole room go rigid. The air in that office changed instantly. I felt it before anyone said a word, a kind of collective intake of breath, the sound a room makes right before something irreversible happens. My mother's hand froze mid-twist on her ring. Andre's leg stopped bouncing entirely. My father leaned forward, squinting hard. Who in God's name is that? Darius had already dug up the answer. Keisha's obstetrician, the same doctor who confirmed her pregnancy to the entire family just weeks before. Room dropped about 10 degrees right then. Somebody's chair creaked. Nobody moved to fill the silence. I watched Keisha's face in that silence. Watched the careful mask she'd been wearing for weeks finally start to slip. Watched her eyes dart toward the door, like she was calculating how far she'd get if she just stood up and walked out right then. And then came the detail that changed everything. Darius, working with the lawyer, had pulled medical records showing the timeline didn't add up. The pregnancy was real, but by her own dates, the baby couldn't have been Andre's. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't show up as one lie. It's a whole structure of them, each one holding the next one up. Keisha hadn't just stolen money. She'd used a pregnancy, about the most sacred trust a family can give somebody, as scaffolding for something bigger. People don't usually get that calculated overnight. Means the small lies worked so well, for so long, the big ones started feeling safe too. I sat there absorbing it the way you absorb news that's too large to feel all at once. In pieces, in waves. First, the relief that the theft accusation was finally, undeniably off my shoulders. Then, almost immediately behind it, a kind of grief for Andre that I hadn't expected to feel. Watching my brother's whole understanding of his marriage collapse in real time, 3 feet away from me. Keisha's composure just broke. Tried to talk, tried to explain, words coming out in pieces that didn't make sense. I watched her hands start trembling against the edge of the table, the same hands that had pointed at me so confidently in that kitchen weeks earlier. And there was no satisfaction in watching her unravel, just a tired, hollow recognition that the truth had finally caught up to all of us at once. Andre sat frozen a long moment before he finally spoke, barely above a whisper. You used a baby. No, you used somebody else's baby to manipulate my whole family? His voice cracked on the last word. I'd known my brother my whole life, watched him cry exactly twice before that day, and hearing his voice break like that in front of all of us hurt in a way I hadn't expected it to. Whatever distance had grown between us over the last month, in that moment all I felt was the old familiar ache of wanting to protect him from something I couldn't fix. My parents sank into their chairs, finally feeling the weight of what they'd done to me. My mother grabbed my hand, fingers shaking, crying. My father didn't say anything, just stared at the table. I felt my mother's hand tighten around mine, and I let her hold on, even though some small, hardened part of me wanted to pull away. Forgiveness, I was learning, doesn't arrive all at once just because the truth finally does. Keisha tried once more. Everything I did because of my baby. The lawyer cut her off, laid out a separate set of transfers. Money moved into accounts under her own name, evidence of something that had been building for months. A plan, it turned out, to drain the restaurant before she disappeared with the man from the footage. No triumph in that room, not for me, just exhaustion. Relief and grief so tangled together I couldn't pull them apart. Vindication rarely feels like winning when it costs you this much. The body doesn't know how to grieve and celebrate at the same time, so it just goes still. Same as mine did, sitting in that office while everybody finally caught up to what I'd known for weeks. The truth was finally out, but it cost nearly everything to get there. My mother held my hand, weeping, apologizing in broken half-sentences. Andre stood up right in that office, announced he was separating from Keisha, effective immediately. Whatever came next for her, legally, none of us could control that anymore. Every second in that room felt like a blade and a release, both at once. I sat there long after everyone else had started gathering their things, just trying to breathe, trying to let my body understand that the fight was actually over. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like finally being allowed to put down something impossibly heavy that I'd been carrying alone for weeks. The legal process moved slow but steady after that. Keisha faced what was coming to her: fraud, deception, deliberate theft under false pretenses. The restaurant struggled some under the weight of everything, but it stayed open. My father's not the kind of man who gives up easy. I drove past it more than once in those early weeks, slowing down without quite meaning to, watching the lights still glowing warm through the front windows in the evenings, the same way they always had. Some part of me needed to know it was still standing, even when I wasn't ready to walk back through the door myself. Andre moved into his own place, came by not long after, sat across from me at my kitchen table, holding a coffee mug he never even drank from. I failed you, he said, voice low. Stayed quiet when I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry, Amani. I'm really sorry. I watched him turn that mug in slow circles on the table while he talked, never quite meeting my eyes, the same way Andre had always done since we were kids, whenever he was working up the nerve to say something hard. I let him finish. I didn't make it easy for him, and I didn't make it harder than it needed to be either. Just let the apology sit there in the space between us, real and a little overdue. There was a long stretch of silence after he finished talking, the kind neither of us rushed to fill. I could hear the refrigerator humming, a car passing outside, the small, ordinary sounds of a life still moving forward, even when everything inside that kitchen felt suspended. Finally, I reached across the table and put my hand over his, just for a second. Not forgiveness yet, just a sign that the door wasn't closed all the way. He looked up at me then, eyes wet, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something like my brother again. Not the man who'd gone quiet in that lawyer's office, but the boy who used to walk me home from school so I wouldn't have to do it alone. Jamal and I started talking again. Slow, careful. The way you rebuild something that got badly cracked. We went to counseling once a week, learning how to say the things we'd both been too scared or too proud to say before. He admitted the family pressure, his own insecurity, pushed him toward doubting me faster than he ever should have. I let fear make my decisions for me, he told me one night, voice rough. Won't do that to you again. I remember the first session where he actually cried, sitting across from me on that small therapy couch, admitting out loud how much shame he carried over the way he looked at me in that kitchen. I didn't comfort him right away. I just let him sit with it, the way I'd had to sit with my own pain for weeks without anyone rushing in to fix it for me. There was something almost unbearable about watching him finally feel the weight of it, and something necessary too. I needed to see that weight land on him before I could believe he understood what it had cost me. Trust, once it breaks, doesn't usually come back whole. Comes back slow, small deposits, same as rebuilding any account that got drained dry. I didn't rush back into anything, not with him, not with my parents. Healing moves on its own clock, not anybody else's. My parents showed up at my apartment more than once that month, sat at my little kitchen table instead of theirs, apologizing in that careful, awkward way people do when they know words can't really fix what they broke. I made tea, listened, finally told them what I needed them to hear. I'm working on forgiving you both, but some of this is going to take real time. I'm not coming back to the restaurant right now. I need my own thing first. They nodded. First time in a long while, they didn't push past a boundary I set. They respected it. I noticed something different in my mother during those visits, a kind of careful gentleness she hadn't shown in years, like she was relearning how to be in a room with me without assuming the worst. She'd bring small things, a tin of cookies, a new dish towel to replace the worn-out one she always used, little offerings that said more than her words ever could. One Sunday, she stayed longer than usual, sitting across from me at that small table long after her tea had gone cold. She asked, almost in a whisper, if I remembered the way she used to braid my hair on the back porch when I was small, humming under her breath the whole time. I told her I did. She nodded, and I watched her eyes well up, like she was grieving the version of motherhood she thought she'd lost the night she stood in that kitchen and chose Keisha's tears over her own daughter's word. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't. Not yet. But I let her sit with the memory anyway, because some bridges get rebuilt one quiet, honest moment at a time. So I built my own thing. Darius as my partner, we started a small financial consulting firm in Atlanta, helping Black-owned businesses get their books straight, their futures steadier. Gave me back a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. Every client I helped, every small business I watched find its footing, reminded me I'd survived something that could have broken me. And it hadn't. There was a particular satisfaction in that work that I hadn't expected, watching nervous small business owners walk into our little office carrying the same kind of fear I'd carried for weeks. Fear that the numbers didn't add up. Fear that somebody was going to find something wrong and blame them for it. I understood that fear now in a way I never had before, and helping them work through it, line by line, felt like healing something in myself at the same time. Family settled into a new shape after that, more honest, even if it wasn't all the way whole. Andre called to check in more than he ever used to. Jamal stayed close, patient, present, while I figured out what trust looked like the second time around. Looking back now, I'm not that woman frozen in her parents' kitchen, accused of something she never did. I'm Amani Washington, the one who got back up when everything fell apart at once. Truth finds its way to the light eventually, even when it takes its sweet time, even when it costs you almost everything along the way. Self-respect outweighs anybody's approval, even the people who raised you. That footage cleared my name in their eyes, but it was the boundaries I set after that protected my heart from getting broken the same way twice. Small things brought me back to myself during all that. My mother's porch swing, creaking the same stubborn way it has since before I was born. Every Sunday, I sit beside her on it. We don't always talk much out there. Sometimes we just sit, watching the same street I grew up on, listening to that same stubborn creak, and that's enough. My grandson, Andre's boy, from a relationship that came later, born into a family finally being honest with each other, called my old vacuum the dragon the first time he heard it roar up, and I laughed harder than I had in months, the kind of laugh that catches you off guard and reminds you your body still remembers how to do it. Betty next door still waves from her porch every evening like nothing ever went wrong, and some days, coffee in hand, I let myself believe her. There are still hard days when I catch myself flinching at a raised voice that isn't even directed at me, or doubting a kind word a little longer than I should. Healing, I've learned, isn't a straight line. It's more like that porch swing, creaking forward, swinging back, never quite settling into stillness, but never falling apart either. I keep a small notebook now, something I started in those first raw weeks after everything broke open, the kind of thing I never would have bothered with before. Some nights I write down whatever's sitting heavy in my chest. Other nights I just write down something good. The sound of my mother humming in the kitchen, the way Jamal still reaches for my hand without thinking about it now, the particular gold the evening light turns when it hits Cascade Road around 6 o'clock. I flip back through the early pages sometimes, and it's strange to see my own handwriting from those nights, shaky, uneven, barely holding together. I don't recognize that woman the way I used to, but I'm grateful to her anyway for not giving up on the version of me sitting here now. There's a particular kind of quiet that settled into my life since then, one I had to learn to stop being afraid of. For a long time, quiet meant something was wrong, meant somebody was hiding something, meant the storm was about to start again. Now it just means peace. It means a Sunday afternoon with nowhere to be and nobody waiting to accuse me of something I didn't do. I sit with that quiet now, let it hold me instead of unsettle me, and some evenings, that alone feels like the biggest victory of all. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside Washington's Soul Food again, first time in months. Fried chicken, warm cornbread, drifting out into the street, carrying me right back to being a little girl, safe in that kitchen before any of this happened. I smiled, just a little, turned, walked back to my car. Jamal was waiting by the door, took my hand as I climbed in. We drove home together, talking quiet about what might come next. No promises, just two people willing to try again. Slow, honest. Every step forward was its own quiet proof of something I learned the hard way that year. The strength I needed was in me the whole time, even on the nights I felt like I had nothing left. Forgiveness, I came to understand, was something I gave myself for my own peace, not a ticket back to who I used to be. I wrote my own next chapter, in my own voice, and nobody's taking that from me again. This story reminds us that truth doesn't always show up on time, but it never stops trying to find its way home. It reminds us that quiet strength and self-respect carry you through, even when the people closest to you can't see clearly when it matters most. And it teaches us this: real justice doesn't come from begging people to believe you. It comes from the slow, steady work of uncovering what's real and choosing, every day after, to stand in your own truth, no matter who doubted you along the way.